The scent of freshly baked bread and sliced deli meat filled the air, mixing with the faint chemical tang of the sanitizer we used to wipe down the counters. It was the kind of smell that clung to your clothes long after a shift ended. I'd gotten used to it. I glanced up at the wall clock, 5:42 p.m. The dinner rush was in full swing, a long line of customers stretching from the counter to the door, their impatient chatter blending with the hum of the refrigerator units behind me. "Foot-long Italian BMT on wheat, extra pickles," I called, sliding the sandwich down the line. "Got it." Marco, my co-worker at the register, called back as he rang up the order. We were running with a 3-person crew tonight: me, Marco, and Jasmine. Marco handled the register while Jasmine and I built the sandwiches. The system worked, but during rushes like this it always felt like we were barely keeping up. I was in the middle of layering turkey onto a 6-inch sub when I felt it. That strange, unmistakable sensation of being watched. I glanced up. That's when I saw him. A man stood near the back of the line. He wasn't doing anything, just staring at me. Not a quick glance, not absent-mindedly looking around the store. He was staring. I looked away immediately, focusing back on my work. Customers stared all the time. It wasn't weird. Maybe I was imagining it. 5 minutes later, I looked up again. He was still staring. The man looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. His dark brown hair was slightly unkempt, and he had a gaunt face with hollow cheeks. He wore a plain gray hoodie with the hood down, his hands stuffed into his pockets. But it was his eyes that unsettled me, wide, unblinking, fixed on me like I was the only person in the room. A chill ran through me. I dropped my gaze, my hands working faster on the sandwiches. He's just a customer. He'll order and leave. But 10 minutes passed, then 15, and I never had to make him a sandwich. When I glanced up again, he was gone from the line. Good. Maybe he'd left. But when I scanned the restaurant, I spotted him immediately. He hadn't left. He had moved to the far corner of the seating area, and he was still staring. Relief only came when the rush finally died down around 8:30 p.m. The man had vanished. At least that's what I thought. By 9:30 p.m., as Marco and I finished closing, I saw him again, outside, standing just beyond the glass windows. His face glowed eerily under the neon open sign. My stomach twisted. He was right there, staring. I rushed to the back. "Marco," I said, breathless. "That guy, the one that was staring earlier." "He's outside," Marco frowned. "Who?" I pulled him to the front. "Him." But the man was gone. Just an empty parking lot under dim streetlights. Marco gave me a look. "You good?" "Yeah," I lied. But my voice wavered. We finished closing and stepped outside at 10 o'clock sharp. Marco walked me to my car, cracking jokes to lighten the mood. I laughed, but my hands still shook as I unlocked my door. Driving home, I checked my mirrors constantly. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched never left. Days passed. No sign of him. Until a slow Tuesday night, the door chimed. I looked up and froze. It was him. I forced my voice steady. "Welcome to Substop. What can I get for you?" His lips twitched slightly, almost like a smile, but his eyes never changed. "Foot-long turkey," he said, his voice soft, dry. I nodded quickly. "That'll be—" "Not for now," he interrupted. "I'll be back later. Just wanted to say hi." My blood turned to ice. He didn't pay, didn't order, just walked out. After that, he kept showing up, not always inside. Sometimes outside, standing under a broken streetlight. Sometimes in a car with the engine off. Sometimes closer, too close. One night, I was closing alone. I stepped outside, keys in hand. He was there, just a few feet away. "Hey," he whispered. I bolted back inside, locking the door. He didn't try to follow, he just stood there, watching. I called everyone I could, my manager, Marco, even my brother. By the time someone arrived to pick me up, the man was gone. And just like that, I never saw him again. Not at work, not outside, not anywhere. I don't know who he was, I don't know what he wanted, but even now, years later, every time I pass a sandwich shop, I still check the parking lot. just in case. The fluorescent glow of the sub-stop sign flickered slightly as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. The strip mall was quiet, its storefronts dark except for the small sandwich shop tucked in the corner. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 8:13 p.m. Not late, but late enough that the dinner rush had long since died down. The pavement still glistened from a light drizzle earlier in the evening, the air carrying that cool, damp scent of fresh rain. Only one other car sat in the lot, an older sedan with peeling paint parked a few spaces down. It looked like it had been there for hours, maybe days. Inside, the shop was warm and smelled faintly of bread and sliced vegetables. The only employee, a bored-looking young guy in a wrinkled green uniform, barely glanced up from his phone when I walked in. "Hey," he muttered, stuffing his phone into his apron and moving sluggishly to the counter. I ordered quickly. "Turkey sub, extra mayo, no onions." He slapped everything together in silence. The place was so empty that I could hear the soda machine humming and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. As I reached for a cup at the soda fountain, something outside caught my eye. A man walked past on the sidewalk just beyond the shop's window. He was tall and lanky, with messy, unkempt hair, wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants. His clothes looked slightly damp, like he'd been out in the drizzle. As he passed the glass, his head turned slightly. For a brief second, our eyes met. It wasn't just a passing glance. It was a look, not a smile, not a nod, just an odd, lingering stare before he kept walking. Unease crawled under my skin, but I brushed it off. People look at each other all the time. I filled my drink, grabbed my sandwich, and stepped back into the parking lot. The air was cool and still. That's when I heard it, footsteps behind me. Soft, unhurried, I turned my head slightly. It was him, the man from the window. He had changed direction. He was walking toward me now. His stride was casual but deliberate. He wasn't running, wasn't calling out, just following. I quickened my pace, reaching my car and unlocking it. My hands felt clumsy. "Hey!" a voice called behind me. "Hold up a second." I froze halfway into my car. Slowly, I turned just enough to see him standing a few feet away, closer than I expected. He wasn't smiling, but his tone was almost friendly. "Can you give me a ride?" I stared at him. "What?" "I just need to get to the gas station," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the street. "It's not far, just down that way." I glanced. The gas station he pointed to was indeed close, maybe a minute's drive. Still, my gut twisted. I should have said no, should have just gotten in my car and left. But my brain tried to rationalize. It's close, it's public, it'll be fine. "I'm kind of in a hurry," I said, forcing a polite tone. "It's real quick," he insisted. "I'm meeting a friend there." The cold night air bit at my skin. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Fine." But just to the gas station, his expression didn't change, but he muttered a quiet "thanks" and walked around to the passenger side. I got in first, shoving my drink into the cup holder. My hands were clammy as I gripped the steering wheel. He climbed in, shut the door, didn't buckle his seatbelt. The car suddenly felt smaller. He smelled damp, like sweat and wet fabric. I pulled out of the lot, my pulse unnaturally fast for such a simple drive. Neither of us spoke. The gas station was just ahead. As I turned into the lot, I glanced at him. He was staring straight ahead, his expression blank, unreadable. I pulled into a spot near the back. "All right," I said, forcing a light tone. "Here you go." He didn't move. Seconds stretched. "Hey," I tried again. This is it." He turned his head slightly. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "This isn't the one," he said. My stomach tightened. "What?" He motioned vaguely again. "The other gas station. It's a little further down." "No. This is where you pointed," I said. My voice was firmer now. He let out a quiet sigh. "Nah, the other one." I gripped the steering wheel. "I can't go any further. This is as far as I'm going." Silence. The air in the car felt heavier. I glanced toward the gas station. A few cars were parked by the pumps. Inside, a clerk stood behind the counter, oblivious. I turned back to the man. His expression had changed. The casual, slightly awkward demeanor was gone. His face was blank, cold. And he wasn't getting out. My pulse spiked. "I need you to get out," I said, forcing calm into my voice. He didn't move. A strange, horrible feeling crawled up my spine. Then, headlights in my rearview mirror. A police cruiser pulled into the lot. The man saw it too. His entire body tensed. Without a word, he pushed open the door and stepped out. He didn't slam it, didn't run. Just walked away quickly, hands shoved into his hoodie pocket, disappearing around the side of the building. I didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse, backed out fast, and got the hell out of there. I don't know what he wanted. Maybe he was harmless. Maybe he wasn't. But I know this. I'll never make that mistake again. I got lucky, really lucky. It had been an exhausting day. Not the kind of exhaustion where your body just aches, though that was there too, but the deep, numbing kind where your brain feels like it's been wrung out and left to dry. I'd stayed at the office far later than usual, stuck finishing a last-minute project. By the time I finally left, it was well past 10 p.m. The highway stretched out in front of me, dark and nearly empty, only the occasional set of headlights flashing past in the opposite lane. My stomach growled painfully. I hadn't eaten in hours. Normally I packed food or grabbed something before leaving work, but tonight I had skipped both. Out here, miles away from the city, food options were scarce. I was about to settle for stale gas station snacks when I spotted it. That familiar green and yellow glow. Subway. The sign stood bright against the otherwise empty strip of road, a lonely beacon in the dark. I wasn't even sure if they'd still be open, but I figured it was worth a shot. I pulled off the exit and into the small lot. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. No cars, not one. I frowned. Usually there'd be at least an employee's car parked out back, but the place looked deserted. Still, from the road, I could have sworn I'd seen movement inside. A shadow, maybe? I parked, telling myself maybe they were just slow or maybe employees parked elsewhere. The glass door swung open easily when I tried it. That was the second odd thing. Most places lock up the second they close. Inside, I was hit with silence. Not the casual quiet of a late-night shift, but an unnatural, heavy silence. The kind that presses in on you, makes your ears strain for any sound at all. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, bathing the empty booths in sterile white. The smell of bread lingered in the air, but it was stale, like it had been sitting out too long. "Hello?" I called toward the counter. No answer. Maybe they were in the back. I waited a moment, shifting uneasily. You expect noise in a restaurant, even an empty one. The hum of ovens, the faint shuffle of someone moving around. But here, nothing. I leaned forward, trying to peek through the opening toward the back kitchen. That's when the lights cut out, all at once. The room was swallowed in darkness, leaving only the faint orange glow of the streetlights bleeding through the windows. My breath hitched. And then, movement. Something shifted behind the counter. A shadow stirring in the dark. My pulse spiked. The store had been empty. Completely empty, I'd checked. But now I wasn't alone. A figure stepped forward into the weak light. Tall, male, dressed in dark clothing, not an employee. His posture was stiff, unnatural. He didn't move, he didn't speak. He just stood behind the counter, staring. Every instinct screamed at me that something was wrong. I turned for the door. My feet moved before my brain fully caught up. That's when the footsteps started, fast, heavy. He was moving, coming around the counter. I didn't dare look back. My hand fumbled for the door handle, pulling with all my strength. Then I heard it, another door opening. Somewhere deeper inside the restaurant. The back door. I yanked the front door open and stumbled into the night air. My chest heaved, my legs already running. Behind me, his footsteps followed, closer than I wanted to believe. My car was only a few spaces away, but it felt impossibly far. My keys were already in my hand, thank God. I didn't even remember grabbing them. I unlocked the car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. Just as I slammed it shut, I saw him. Right there, just feet from my car. His face was half hidden in shadow, but I saw enough. Enough to know he wasn't some confused employee. Enough to know that if I'd hesitated even a second longer, he would have reached me. My hands shook violently as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. He lunged. I didn't wait. My foot slammed on the gas. Tires squealed as I peeled out of the lot, the entire car vibrating under me. I shot back onto the empty road, heart hammering so hard I thought I might black out. I checked the rearview mirror once. He was still there, standing in the lot, watching me go. I didn't stop driving, not until I was miles away, safely at home, doors locked, lights on. I never found out what was really happening that night. Was he squatting in a closed subway, waiting for someone, anyone, to walk in? Or had he been waiting specifically for me? I don't know. But I do know this. He followed me. He chased me. And if I had reacted even a second slower, I might not have made it out at all. There's a small subway near my neighborhood that I used to stop at all the time. It wasn't anything special. Just your average fast food chain with the usual bread smell that hit you the second you walked in. But there was always something a little off about it. The location itself was old. You could tell it had been there longer than most subways, probably converted from a different restaurant years ago. The floor tiles were chipped, the walls slightly yellowed, and the lights flickered in the back corner where the soda machine stood. Still, it was convenient, and I never thought too hard about it, until one late evening. I had worked late, and it was past 9 o'clock when I stopped in for a quick sandwich. The place was empty, except for a young employee behind the counter. He looked exhausted, pale, and honestly a little nervous. I ordered my usual, trying to make small talk. "Slow night?" He glanced around before answering, almost like he didn't want to say too much. "Yeah. It gets weird after dark here, weird." That word stuck with me. "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked at me, then forced a smile. "Nothing, just the building makes noises sometimes." I laughed lightly, thinking he meant pipes or rats. But he didn't laugh back. He just handed me my sandwich and muttered, "Don't stay too long." That should have been my first warning. I sat down anyway, scrolling through my phone while I ate. A few minutes in, I heard it, something faint but clear. A bang from below. I froze. There wasn't supposed to be a below. Subways don't usually have basements, right? I glanced toward the counter. The employee had stiffened, his eyes darting toward the floor. Another sound followed, a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the ground. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Is there a basement here?" I asked cautiously. The employee didn't answer right away. He just shook his head quickly, muttering, "We're not supposed to talk about it." My stomach turned. Not supposed to talk about it? What kind of answer was that? Before I could press further, the sound came again, louder this time. A scraping noise followed by what I swear was a muffled voice. It was coming from beneath the floor. The employee dropped what he was holding, his hands trembling. "You need to leave," he whispered. "Now." But curiosity is dangerous, and I didn't listen. Instead of leaving, I pretended to pack up my things, but I lingered, watching him. A few minutes later, he went into the back room. That's when I saw it. Behind the counter, near the corner where the wall met the floor, there was a small door, barely noticeable, and it was cracked open. I know I shouldn't have done it. Every instinct screamed at me not to. But something in me, maybe hunger for truth, maybe sheer stupidity, pushed me forward. I slipped behind the counter when no one was watching and crouched by the little door. A stale, damp smell wafted up from the darkness inside. It wasn't just a crawl space, it was stairs, leading down. I held my phone flashlight out and started down the steps. The air grew colder immediately. The smell got worse, mold mixed with something metallic. At the bottom was a narrow hallway, concrete walls cracked with age. And then I saw them. Rooms, lining each side of the hall. The first one was empty except for a rusted metal table. Chains hung from the wall. The second had scratch marks all along the inside of the door. Deep grooves like someone had clawed at it in desperation. My stomach lurched, and then one of the doors moved. Just a small rattle, but enough to make me freeze in place. From behind it I heard something. Breathing. Heavy. Uneven. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. My flashlight shook in my hand, the beam landing on words scratched into the concrete wall. Don't let them out. Before I could process it, footsteps echoed behind me. Someone was coming down the stairs. I panicked, darting back into the shadows of one of the empty rooms, crouching low. The beam of another flashlight swept across the hallway. It was the employee. His face looked different now, cold, detached. He stopped by the rattling door and whispered something I couldn't make out. The breathing quieted. Then he turned, his light sweeping dangerously close to where I was hiding. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure he could hear it, but after a moment he turned and started back up the stairs. I didn't wait. The second he disappeared, I bolted. My feet pounded the steps, my breath ragged, and I didn't stop until I burst out the front door of that subway and into the night air. I never went back, and I never told anyone. But sometimes when I pass by that building, I still think about what I saw. The chains, the scratch marks, the breathing behind the door, and I wonder what or who is locked down there. I used to work at a subway when I was in college. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me flexible hours. Most of the time it was fine, boring even. But late night shifts, that was a different story. Our store closed at midnight, and the last shift always felt eerie. Customers stopped coming after 10:30, leaving the place strangely quiet. You'd hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights, and your own footsteps echoing on the tiles, but the weirdest part of those nights wasn't the silence. It was him. The night manager, that's what we all called him. None of us knew his real name. He wasn't on the schedule, but he'd show up sometimes when you least expected it, always after closing. He was tall, with thinning hair and sunken eyes that never seemed to blink enough. His subway uniform looked older than anyone else's, faded and stained. And the way he talked, flat, monotone, like he was reading from a script. The first time I met him, I had just finished mopping the floor. The front doors were locked, and I thought I was alone. I turned to grab my bag, and there he was, standing behind the counter, watching me. I nearly screamed. "You missed a spot," he said in that lifeless voice, pointing to a corner of the floor. I stammered out an apology, but something about his expression froze me in place. He wasn't angry. He wasn't amused. His face was blank, completely blank. "Always clean every inch," he added. "The customers notice." And then he turned and walked into the back, disappearing without another word. When I asked my co-workers about him the next day, their reactions unsettled me even more. "Oh yeah," one said. "He's been around forever." Another shrugged. "Don't worry. Just do what he says." "But who is he?" I pressed. Nobody knew. Or maybe they did and just didn't want to say. Weeks passed before I saw him again. This time it was close to 1 a.m. I'd stayed late to finish inventory, and the store was dark except for a single light above the counter. When I walked out of the back office, I nearly dropped the clipboard in my hands. He was standing in the dining area facing the wall. Just standing there. I cleared my throat. Sir? We're closed." He didn't turn around. Instead, he whispered something too soft for me to hear. "Sorry, what?" I asked, my voice shaking. He turned slowly, his face pale in the dim light. His lips barely moved, but I heard him this time. "They come in through the walls." I froze. "What?" He blinked slowly, then walked past me without another word, disappearing into the back again. I didn't follow. The next day I told my manager. She looked uncomfortable, then said, "Don't talk about him. Just leave it alone," but I couldn't. Because after that night, strange things started happening. I'd hear noises in the dining area when I knew I was alone, soft shuffling like feet dragging. Sometimes the bread oven would turn on by itself, its timer dinging even when it was empty. Once, when I went to the back freezer, I swore I saw someone standing inside through the foggy glass window. But when I opened it, the room was empty. The worst was the night I closed alone. I was wiping down the counter when the lights flickered, just once. But when they came back on, I saw him, the night manager, standing on the other side of the counter directly in front of me. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't heard footsteps. He was just there. "You didn't clean the bathrooms," he said. My throat tightened. I was going to. His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "They come in through the drains," he whispered. And then he smiled. It was the first time I'd ever seen him smile. And it was wrong. Too wide. Too forced. Like he was stretching skin that didn't fit his face. I ran. I left the counter half-wiped, grabbed my bag, and sprinted out the door without looking back. The next morning, I came in ready to quit. I didn't care about the job anymore. I just wanted out. But when I told my manager, she looked at me with something close to pity. "He's always been here," she said softly. "Even before this was a subway." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. She didn't answer, and I realized then. I didn't want to know. I quit that day. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass that strip of road, I see the faint glow of the subway sign, and I wonder if he's still in there, standing by the drains, watching, waiting. It was a stormy night when I pulled into the subway parking lot. The rain came down in sheets, slapping against the windshield, making the world outside look warped and twisted. I almost didn't stop. It was late. The neon open sign flickered weakly in the window, and the parking lot was empty except for my car. But I was hungry, and it was the only place open for miles. Inside, the restaurant was quiet. Too quiet. A single employee stood behind the counter. A young woman, maybe early 20s. Her uniform was clean, but her face was pale, and her eyes looked tired in a way that went beyond working late. "Hey," I said, trying to sound friendly. "Still open?" She gave a stiff nod. "Yeah. Just you tonight?" I glanced at the empty booths. "Looks like it." Her hands trembled slightly as she began to make my sandwich. I tried to ignore it, but something felt off. The silence pressed in around us, broken only by the sound of bread being sliced and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard it. The bell on the door jingled. Another customer? But when I turned, no one was there. The glass door was closed, the rain still beating against it. I looked back at the employee. She had gone completely still, knife hovering above the tomato she was cutting. "You heard that too, right?" I asked, half joking. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't mention it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" But she didn't answer. She just shoved my sandwich into a bag, her movements quick and nervous. That's when it happened again. The bell jingled, clear, sharp, but the door didn't move. This time I felt the air change, like someone had walked in bringing the cold night with them. The girl's hands shook as she pushed the bag toward me. "Take it. Please." And confused, I grabbed the bag but didn't move toward the door. Curiosity rooted me to the spot. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, one of the booths shifted. The vinyl seat dipped just slightly, like someone had sat down. But the booth was empty. My heart skipped. "Did you see that?" I whispered. The employee shook her head violently, whispering back, "Don't talk to it. Just leave." The air grew colder still, my breath fogging faintly in the fluorescent light. I couldn't move, couldn't stop staring at that empty booth. And then, movement. The straw in a cup left on the table began to stir. Slowly at first, then violently, as if someone were swirling it with unseen hands. I stumbled backward, bumping into the counter. The girl flinched, tears welling in her eyes. "Go!" she hissed, almost begging. Before it notices you. Before it notices me. That was enough. I grabbed my sandwich and bolted for the door, nearly slipping on the wet floor. As I pushed outside into the storm, I dared to glance back through the glass. The booth was no longer empty. There was a figure sitting there now, pale, shadowy, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its mouth gaping wide in a silent scream. And the girl behind the counter? She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the figure either. She just stood frozen in place, staring straight ahead, her lips moving soundlessly, praying. I ran to my car, heart pounding, and didn't look back again until I was on the highway. When I finally dared open the bag, my stomach dropped. The sandwich inside wasn't the one I ordered. The bread was burned black. The meat was raw. And written in mustard across the inside of the wrapper were 3 words. You saw me. I worked at a Subway in a quiet suburban strip mall during my college years. It wasn't the worst job. Long hours, low pay, endless bread smell, but it kept the rent paid. The late-night shifts were the hardest. Our location stayed open until 11 p.m., and after 9, the place was usually empty. Just me, the hum of the refrigerators and the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. The thing was, we had cameras everywhere. A set of cheap black and white security monitors sat in the back room. I hated looking at them. Not because I had anything to hide, but because sometimes they showed things that weren't there when I stepped out front. It started small. I'd glance at the feed and see a figure standing at the counter, just a vague shape of a man. But when I'd rush out, the place would be empty. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Old cameras, static, interference. But then it got worse. One night, around 10:15 p.m., I was mopping near the back when I heard the bell on the door chime. I froze. I hadn't heard it open. Heart racing, I peeked at the front counter. Nothing. The door was still locked. But when I checked the monitors, my blood ran cold. On the camera pointed at the front counter, there he was. A man. Tall, thin, face blurred like the static had swallowed it. He stood perfectly still, hands resting on the glass, staring straight into the lens. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the mop. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop. My eyes flicked to the second camera, the one that showed the dining area. He was there too. Not at the counter anymore, sitting in one of the booths, still facing the camera, still watching. I bolted to the front, desperate to prove it was just a glitch. But when I got there, the booths were empty. The counter was clear, the store was silent. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out thin, nervous. Maybe I was just tired, maybe the cameras were lagging. But then I noticed something on the table of the booth where he'd been sitting. A napkin. Crumpled. But I hadn't cleaned that booth in hours. Swallowing hard, I picked it up. Scrawled across it in uneven handwriting were 3 words. Check camera 4. My hands shook as I carried it back to the office. Camera 4 was the one pointed at the back hallway, the one that led to the stockroom, the freezer, and the employee exit. When I looked at the screen, I almost screamed. The man was there, standing in the hallway, closer, facing the camera, facing me. That was it. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't even finish closing, didn't mop, didn't count the drawer, didn't lock the freezer. I just got the hell out. The manager chewed me out the next morning, but I didn't care. I didn't tell her what I saw, I just made up some excuse about feeling sick. For a while, nothing happened. The shifts were quiet again. No strange glitches, no napkins left behind. Until my very last week on the job. I was wiping down the sandwich line when I glanced up at the monitor we had mounted above the counter for customers to see. It normally showed the live feed of the front counter just for security transparency. But this time it didn't show me. It showed him, the man, standing directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Empty air. When I looked back at the monitor, the feed had returned to normal. Just me, pale and shaking, staring at my own reflection. I quit the next day, and I never set foot in that subway again. But sometimes late at night when I catch my reflection in a dark window or glance at the static on my TV, I swear I still see him, watching, waiting. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday night. I had been stuck at my office downtown for hours, the clock ticking relentlessly past 10 p.m. My stomach twisted with hunger, and the idea of driving home without eating filled me with a sense of growing irritation. Then something worse. Unease. It had been a long day and my mind was foggy, my body sluggish. Subway was the only place still open, a familiar glow of green and yellow in the dark strip of road. I pulled into the parking lot and immediately something felt off. It was empty, not a single car. Not even the small sedan employees sometimes left parked near the side exit. The lot reflected the flickering neon sign in pools of rainwater from a storm earlier in the evening. It was quiet, too quiet. Usually, even at this hour, there were a couple of late-night stragglers, someone waiting for a ride or grabbing a quick snack. Shrugging uneasily, I walked in. The smell hit me first. Warm, yeasty bread, crisp vegetables, and the faint tang of the sanitized counters. But beneath it, faint and almost imperceptible, was another scent. Metallic, acrid, like rust mixed with burnt wires. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining it, and approached the counter. The employee behind the counter barely looked up. She was young, early 20s maybe, her uniform tidy but slightly wrinkled, her posture stiff. Her eyes, though, were what unsettled me, hollow, drained, like she hadn't seen daylight in days. "Hi, are you still open?" I asked, my voice tentative. She gave a slow, stiff nod. "Yeah, just you tonight?" I glanced around. The store was empty, no other customers. The hum of the refrigerator units and the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. "Looks like it," I said, forcing a smile. She began assembling my sandwich mechanically. Each movement was precise, almost robotic, but her hands trembled slightly. I tried to ignore it, scrolling my phone while waiting, though every instinct in me felt tense, alert. Then I saw him. Out of the corner of my eye, through the glass windows reflecting the empty lot, a figure moved. A man. He was tall, lanky, dark hair plastered to his head from the lingering drizzle outside. His hoodie clung to him, hands shoved deep into his pockets, and he stood motionless, staring directly at me. I froze. When I blinked, he hadn't moved. I looked away, shaking my head, trying to rationalize it. Maybe he wasn't looking at me. Maybe he was just someone walking by. But the feeling crawling along my spine told me otherwise. I finished my sandwich quickly, my hands trembling slightly as I stuffed it into the bag. Heart racing, I stepped outside. The lot was empty. The man was gone. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me, but it was short-lived. As I walked toward my car, I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming from behind me. I spun. Nothing. Then I saw him again, closer than before, just a few feet away. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, casual, almost friendly, but it carried a weight that made my stomach twist into knots. "What do you want?" I asked, voice quivering. "Can you give me a ride?" "No," I said sharply, fear tightening my chest. "Just a little way." "It's not safe out here." My brain screamed to get into my car, lock the doors and drive, but I hesitated. There was something in the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, patient, that made me feel like running wasn't enough. Finally, I bolted into the car. My hands shook as I locked the doors, fumbling to start the ignition. He was still there, watching. I floored the gas, barely able to breathe, glancing into the rearview mirror. And he didn't move. He didn't run. He just stood, silent, staring. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Sometimes I would see him in parking lots, across streets, under flickering street lamps as I drove by. Other times just standing silently outside a store, never moving, never speaking. Not every night, but often enough that my anxiety grew into a constant gnawing terror. I stopped going out late. I avoided Subway entirely. But the final night, the one I'll never forget, was worse. I was closing my office late, exhausted when I realized I hadn't eaten. Hunger pushed me toward the familiar neon glow of Subway, ignoring the dread curling in my chest. The strip mall was deserted. Only the buzz of a broken street lamp and the distant hum of passing cars broke the silence. I parked and stepped out into the damp night air. As I approached, the sign flickered ominously. The doors were unlocked. I felt my stomach tighten. Inside, the restaurant smelled the same. Bread, vegetables, sanitized counters, but the metallic tang was stronger, more pronounced, and something about the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead made my skin crawl. No one was at the counter, no employee. The booths were empty. I stepped further inside, calling out softly. "Hello? Anyone here?" Silence. Then I heard it. A whisper. Finally, I froze. From the corner of the dining area, a shadow moved, slow, deliberate. Emerging from the darkness, it was him, the man, closer than ever before. Tall, pale, lanky, his wet clothes clinging to him as if the rain itself had fused to his skin. His face. I can barely remember. Half hidden in shadow, but I remember the eyes. Black, unblinking, and locked onto me like I was prey he had been tracking for weeks. I stumbled backward toward the door. My hands shook uncontrollably. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. I'm leaving," I whispered. He didn't speak. He didn't move fast. He didn't need to. Every step I took toward the door was mirrored in his slow, deliberate advance. I bolted. My keys were in my hand before I realized it. I fumbled with the locks, threw myself into the car, and started the engine with trembling hands. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the lot, watching me. Not running, not chasing, but watching, waiting. I didn't stop. Not at stoplights, not at intersections, not until I was miles away, doors locked, breathing ragged, and the storm behind me fading into the night. I never went back. Months later, a friend told me the subway had been permanently closed for renovations. The employee I had seen was gone. The building sat empty, abandoned. And sometimes, late at night, when I drive past a subway, neon glowing faintly in the rain, I can't help myself. I glance at the parking lot, and in the corner I swear I see him, watching, waiting, always waiting.